Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Politics and Power. In the news this week, as 2014 draws to a close, Time magazine are preparing to announce their Person of the Year. With political heavyweights such as Barack Obama and Angela Merkel in the frontrunners, it was refreshing to see a kind-hearted animal lover amongst the nominees. Extremist group ISIS has set up a special institute designed to recruit and train female jihadis. Offering lessons in everything from sewing to weapons training, there are some early signs that not all of the students have taken quite so well to their lessons. And finally, with news that Londoners are officially the stingiest present givers of anywhere in the UK, one individual is looking forward to taking a little bit of time off this Christmas. Coming up on the rest of the show, we'll be discussing the importance of televised leadership debates, and Calum Piper looks at the numbers behind this year's politics. But first, since the 1960s, televised leadership debates have become a major part of election campaigns. Our reporter Laura Harding takes a look at some of the best and some of the worst performances in her guide on how to win an election debate.
Election debates have seen politicians crash, burn and blossom.
Plan that it's going to work, that if I don't actually carry through on my plan, if I don't keep my promises in the Million Jobs plan, I'll resign.
But there was no need for that because you didn't win. Tip number 2, when you make a good point, be humble, not smarmy.
Policies, even although you can airbrush your posters.
In one sentence.
But you can't airbrush your personality.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign.
If it's appropriate, be humorous and turn criticism against you into a joke.
My opponent's youth and inexperience.
Be polite and you'll make a good impression. Sorry, Bush, somewhere else you need to be? At least try and look like you want to be there. Look at Nixon. He looks like he wants to run 100 miles away. Confidence, personality, humour and general shiftiness. These seem to be the key ingredients which affect how well an election debate can go.
And now, to discuss the importance of the TV leadership debates, I'm joined in the studio by Stephen Reid, Conservative Councillor for Hampshire County Council, Jackie Porter, Lib Dem candidate for Winchester, Patricia Culligan, UKIP candidate for Eastleigh, and Mark Latham, Labour candidate for Eastleigh. Guys, thank you very much for joining me today. So Stephen, start us off. How important are these leadership debates?
Probably more important than they deserve to be, I think. I find the leadership debates last time, I found them to be quite shallow actually, although there were lots of questions. There's no drilling down into the policy. And if you have something like that, where there's too many people trying to answer too many questions in too short a time, it comes across to me as lightweight, but there you go.
Patricia, this will be the first time that UKIP have been involved in the debates, so how important is this for the party?
We should do it. I completely agree with Stephen. Image does matter, but actually I think the public are much more discerning than just that they can look beneath that. They're interested in what people have got to say. It's interesting what their image is, but I think it's the actual message they're putting out that really does the job.
Mark, do you think they can actually have an effect on the result in terms of swaying the voters?
Yes, I think any point where people are put on trial, as it were, I think is very good. That's going to encourage debate and get over what is a very disengaged population. People don't really engage with politics.
Now, originally UKIP and the Green Party weren't going to be included in the debates, but there was a lot of protest from the two parties, and since some of the broadcasters have now gone back on that. Patricia, do you think that UKIP deserve to be included in the debates?
UKIP is the largest party in Europe. That means an awful lot of voters decided to send more MEPs, UKIP MEPs to Brussels than any other party. You know, we've also just fought two very important elections and have two MPs. So from the point of view of, if you like, a true democratic process where people actually have a choice of something very fundamental like that, then of course I do think that UKIP should be included.
I mean, the purpose is to engage with people.
Absolutely.
And if we don't make it very simple and say, okay, you know, these people have got a reasonable right to be here, let's listen to them, we're going to lose people. The biggest number of voters is those that don't vote.
And I think most people who watch the debates have probably got their minds pretty well made up and they're looking for reinforcement from the debate. So I don't think it'll actually change a lot.
The Liberal Democrats did very well in the debates last time in 2010, and it was a different political atmosphere, but I think that the Liberal Democrats would say that they didn't get as much of a boost in the polls as they may have expected.
My reading of the last election was that Nick Clegg did well in the first debate, because he was going on, and I paraphrase appallingly, he was saying a plague on both your houses, and he came across as a new kid on the block. By the time of the third debate, that was wearing a bit thin. And it was
as we said, it was a very good performance, and in terms of the popularity, when they asked people who were watching the debate who they thought came across the best, it was Clegg. But do you feel like, with everything that's happened since, for example, with the student fees, do you feel like there's any way he can replicate that now, or do you think his reputation is too damaged?
He has been very, very charismatic in his radio programmes. He's used to doing this sort of thing. At conference, he's fantastic at standing up in front of us all, answering any question that's put before him.
In terms of his seeming popularity with the public at the moment, though, I mean, Lib Dems have just had two of their worst performances in by-elections, like absolutely awful results for the party. Do you feel like that's reversible based on these debates?
I would say the second one we didn't try very hard. There was a huge issue of who was going to be there, UKIP or Conservatives, and at the end of the day, that was the fight. That was the two-horse race. In Winchester, it's a two-horse race between Conservatives and Liberal Democrats. We know, and we pick our times to fight the election.
No, I don't agree with that. I think Nick Clegg lost his credibility the day that he ripped up the piece of paper he'd signed saying no tuition fees. That was done in public, he signed it, and then he ripped it up, and he lost personal credibility.
Just to lay off the Lib Dems a little bit, in terms of the other parties, how do you all feel like your leaders will perform? So starting with David Cameron.
David Cameron is going to wipe the floor with Ed Miliband. It's as simple as that.
It's a pity he's been trying to avoid the debates for the last 2.5 years,
Yes.
so that's the case.
So what about Nigel Farage? How do you think he's going to perform, given that this is the first real debate that he's been involved with?
He's performed in the European debates. I mean, quite frankly, there is no more charismatic and able performer than Nigel Farage. Absolutely not. He is, well, there's an awful lot of people from other parties. He's a fantastic performer, but he's also sincere, authentic, and cares so deeply, and that comes across. That's why people take to what Nigel Farage has got to say.
The idea
he's not
that
there
it's
with
an
lots of
insurgent
notes
small
and spin
party
doctors.
is slightly incorrect. I think it's very...
Let's touch on what Patricia said there then about Nigel Farage. I assume there's going to be some different opinion on this claim that he's the most charismatic.
Charismatic and sincere and all the other things don't matter a jot if you're getting it wrong all the time. And that's what it boils down to with UKIP.
Probably the biggest criticism that's been thrown at Ed Miliband recently is that he does lack this certain charisma, so surely a TV debate is not going to be his ideal battleground.
We welcome enormously the television debates. Ed is an adept and able performer, and he has a great deal of depth. I don't think we should personalise this particular debate about certain people, that they've got a popular touch. Now that's fine, but you have to look at what they're going to do in government and what they really believe in. And I think that's what we're going to do.
Guys, I'm afraid just for time. So that's all we have time for, but thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And now, Calum Warren Piper takes us through the political year in numbers.
Thanks, Alex. Back in January, Labour sat comfortably on 42% compared to the lax support of 33% held by the Tories at the time. This convincing lead in the YouGov polls slipped slowly but surely out of Miliband's hands when in October he recorded his lowest leadership approval for 33 months with a 71% negative rating. At the same time, UKIP surged to 18%, their highest support ahead of convincing by-election wins in Clacton and in Rochester. Looking at the current standing, Labour and the Conservatives are neck and neck, sticking around 32 or 33% in the polls today. But let's get rid of this data and let's see what the bookies are saying. Out in front with a convincing 20-1 odds to lead their party into 2015 is David Cameron, with Miliband on a worrying 9-1 and Clegg on a near fatal 3.15-1 to lead the Lib Dems into the election in May.
And Calum is with me in the studio now, and Calum, I believe you have a mystery stat for me.
I do indeed, Mr. Delaney. The mystery stat, as it says on the tin, is a small piece of data from a news story of the past 7 days. I'll give you a hint, it's politics-based, but you have to tell me the story that this stat belongs to. Okay, so what have you got for me this week? This week, it's all the eclairs in Paris.
This sounds like a really weird riddle, but I think I actually do know what this is. This is, I believe, the salary that Jeremy Paxman was quoted as saying would still not be enough to tempt him into running for the office of London Mayor.
Exactly. Jeremy Paxman won't be running for London Mayor, not even for all the eclairs in Paris, which I've estimated to be worth €2.5 million worth of chocolate.
That does sound like a pretty tasty offer, but let's move on. Let's talk about the general election. 2014 coming to an end. What have been the biggest events in politics this year?
Well, you've got to think George Osborne's budget back in March has to be one of the more significant parts of the political year, stating that the economy was growing and that we'd be deficit-free by 2017, huge steps ahead.
Although Labour, of course, this week have come out and said they're predicting the deficit's actually going to increase next year, so that doesn't bode well for their predictions,
Not at all,
does it?
not at all. And with the Independent running a front-page story yesterday that we're going to need to borrow 75 billion more, it doesn't look good for George Osborne.
This surely leads us on to another of the year's big events in my mind, the £1.7 billion bill that Cameron was supposedly ambushed with by the EU. Britain was ordered to pay this bill by the 1st of December because of this unexpected growth in the UK economy. That deadline was, of course, yesterday, and the bill hasn't been paid.
Not yet, but you've got to think this has got a lot to do with George Osborne's clever brokering of a deal with the EU, where we'll be paying the first half of the bill sometime in the new year, and then paying off the second half, hopefully interest-free, at a later date.
I mean, tensions between Britain and the EU were already bad enough. We had Cameron saying after the appointment of Jean-Claude Juncker as head of the EU Commission that the job of keeping Britain in the EU was now going to be extremely hard. So is this the final nail in the coffin?
Not necessarily, but with surge of support in UKIP, and a clear, uneasy opinion from the UK public of where we stand in EU, it's unsure as to where, at the moment, as to where our position in EU lies. But until decisions are made, we can only just keep an eye on the situation.
Well, I mean, this surge in support for UKIP, the explosion of support they've had this year, that's surely a significant event in itself.
Significant indeed, with UKIP winning 2 by-elections because of 2 defections from the Conservatives. It shows a clear strength that UKIP have in winning seats in areas that they necessarily didn't think they could.
Well, I mean, as you say, the real threat of UKIP in a way isn't so much winning seats themselves. They may not win a huge number, but it's where they're taking votes away. If they're taking a large number of votes away from the Tories, for example, that's going to benefit Labour, and that could influence the result in itself.
It is certainly going to be an interesting general election.
Okay, thanks very much, Calum. And finally, we come to our story of the week, our favourite item from the world of news, which this week is a tale with a twist. A woman from Connecticut was asked to leave an airplane after her travelling companion became disruptive. Her companion, a pig, who was allegedly travelling with the woman for emotional support, became disruptive after becoming incontinent and running up and down the aircraft. When asked for a comment, the pig said he hoped the ham-fisted airline staff would soon be facing the chop. With an interesting year of politics ahead of us, I guess only time will tell whether the politicians themselves will remain grounded or whether they'll be able to make pigs of their own fly. That's it from this week's Politics and Power, but please do join us in the future. Good night.